Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers, we've got something extra special for our 300th episode celebration. A giveaway. One lucky listener will win a copy of The Independent Farmstead by our amazing guest, Shawn and Beth Dougherty, who raise nearly all their own food using intensive grazing. Plus, we're throwing in a $100 gift card to our online plant shop to help you get growing. To enter, head over to growingfarmers.com/giveaway 300. That's growingfarmers.com/giveaway 300. Hey, Thriving Farmers, Michael Kilpatrick here with yet another episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast. And today my guests are Shawn and Beth Dougherty, dedicated farmers in Eastern Ohio and authors of the book, The Independent Homestead. Using intensive grazing as their primary source of food energy, Shawn and Beth raise a diverse range of livestock, producing most of the food and feed on their farm. Shawn and Beth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. So you guys, your whole premise is that you can have a cow or larger herbivores. That cow can go around, eat the grass. Obviously, there may be some additional feed stuffs that may be going into that as well. And then, no. Okay. So you're just the grass.
Just grass. That's
just
right. Grass and minerals and water.
Okay. And then that produces the entire fertility program for the property or the homestead.
Sort of, and not really.
Okay.
Think more like this is how we plug into solar energy. The principle is the principle behind what we're doing goes back to the conviction when we were in our early 20s that our grandfathers had farmed using only sunlight and rainfall. They were dry farmers in the Southwest. They raised big families and they grew everything, not only everything they ate, but everything their animals ate. They weren't buying feed. And that hint set us up with the thought that farms should be able to run like ecosystems. All you have to do is imagine a really pre-industrial farm. There was nowhere to buy inputs from. Human beings for millennia managed a piece of land as an ecosystem so that the sunlight and rainfall native to it produced all the food, feed, and fertility and fuel on the farm. And I think in the beginning, there was a struggle for us to overcome the modern sort of cultural assumption that all economies depended on tapping into the cash economy, into the economy of buying and selling. And as we overcame that, we realized, no, farms are exactly that. They're ecosystems, and human beings with their ability to observe and make decisions and alterations could make the native ecosystem more abundant, could bring on species that could assist with that. So our principle, the sun shines. When it shines on trees, it's laying down carbon for the long haul in forms like wood or a once-a-year harvest. But where the sun shines on grass, a many times a year harvest is available. And since human beings eat all year long, that's very convenient. Our only problem is 85-90% of the grass produced on a grassland is cellulose. And that's energy that's inaccessible to most macrozootics, most large animals at all. That was where the cow came in. At first it was goats.
Right. But what we discovered was that as we were milking this, you can either do a one-time harvest with these animals, a butchering, or you can do a twice daily harvest of the best food that there is. And we were doing goats and getting some milk and not as excited about goat milk. But when we transitioned to the cow, we couldn't believe how much abundance we got, how much milk we got.
It was delicious.
We were finding that it fed the other animals as well. It feeds the pigs, it feeds the chickens. It's just wonderful. And then when we were introduced to rotational grazing, so that we're moving this animal every day, we were finding that it's improving our pasture. So we have.
It's a perpetual motion machine. It's like reverse of entropy. Instead of a system that gradually decreases in energy, in stored energy, it increases. So an example would be on our rental farm, which had about a half an inch of organic matter on top of subsoil when we got there. We haven't. We had to dig a path through it. It went down about 5 inches, solid topsoil. We didn't continue to dig to see how deep it was, but there are at least 5 inches of topsoil where there wasn't any 15 years ago. You're actually building potential energy into a system, which not only means, as you recognize, it means more abundance now. It also means greatly more resilience for some unforeseeable future, that might require it.
So a cow on a few acres could be your source of fertility. We do more than that because we have a large family. We wanted to feed the whole family. So we have pigs, we have chickens. And now over time, we've been finding other ways to develop fertility. For example, in the garden is a little bit different from our pastures. And we're using the pigs for that. And then in terms of feed, we're, of course, trying to find ways to do all this without buying in feed.
So we haven't bought cow feed in 15 years.
Right.
We haven't bought pig feed in 8 or 9. The one thing we do buy is local wheat to supplement our chickens' feed. And what we're working on now is a program of corn, sunflowers, buckwheat, and milo, sorghum, so that we won't have to buy in the small grains for the chickens.
So there are some things that we are raising to feed our animals. And again, it's it just like your experimentation, we're experimenting and finding some really neat ways to do this.
So in the pasture, our sole source of fertility is good grazing. In the garden, our two primary sources of fertility are, one, green manures grown as green manures or cover crops, but also then tilled in and harvested by chickens. And two, we do keep pigs because any even a micro farm produces usually enough surplus biomass to feed a pig. Our pig litter is composted then and applied just to the kitchen garden.
Yeah. Okay, so then let's take a little detour here to the pigs. What is the pig's food source if you're not buying any pig food?
So we certainly have scraps from the table. We do get some scraps from the convent up the road as well.
Count though, because the sisters get a pig. So
right.
If we just
So again, you have to just figure out how much food is generated by your farm, and that's how you match. That's how many animals you have. So for us, they are fed milk waste and farm waste. So all the weeds that come out of the garden, if we're mowing something and we want to have leftover, when we have leftover grass, that can go into the pigs. They will eat virtually anything.
The thing that sort of unlocked pigs for us was when we realized that the reason human beings partner with pigs, and it is a symbiosis, pigs get a very good life out of it. We partner with them because they are a means by which pre-industrial, pre-refrigeration human beings could store perishable nutrients in a living form that reproduced. Pigs have a couple of qualities that make them extremely valuable to humans. One is that they can reproduce literally to the tune of, say, 3 dozen piglets per sow per year. That's pushing her, but she's capable of it.
Yeah.
2, their growth impulse and their appetite are endlessly elastic. So where most animals will only overindulge to a certain point, like human beings will eat maybe more than they're hungry for, but not a lot more in general. Pigs will simply, sort of open the floodgates, bring it on. They'll grow their appetite to fit what's available. So it makes them able to take without pigs, human beings don't have a way to turn, say, an excess crop of anything perishable into
apples.
That's
squash.
So that's where pigs have fit in the human food system all along. When we realized that and got a little bit more information about what pigs are capable of eating, and most of that information came from the pigs themselves, we realized that, any 3-acre plot that somebody cares to go over is already producing a lot of stuff that could go through a pig. Now, lately in the last 10 years, everybody knows kunis eat grass, but they can't digest cellulose. So most of that is still going through them as fiber. We emphasize for our pigs all the already produced, all of the surplus nutrients that come from our food stream, but we also do grow a couple of crops specifically for them. The principal one is mangel wurzels, giant fodder beets.
Yep.
And so we grow about 3,000 pounds of those a year. We grow 0.2 of an acre, not particularly intensively cultivated. Our arable land, the 9/10, we keep an acre in tillage. 9/10 of that is on the rental farm that had the 1/2 inch of organic matter I told you about.
Yeah.
And everything under that is slick yellow clay subsoil. So we've been building organic matter into those plots for 15 years at the same time that we've been producing a crop out of them. And you can picture that immediately. Like, you put in 10 units of fertility and 9 of them come out as that year's crop. But over, if you could do it consistently, eventually you're changing your tilth, you're increasing nitrogen availability and just sort of biological activity.
So when you started, did you have to kind of jump start it with like maybe buying in outside hay to get the cows off to a good start, or?
Yeah. So in the beginning, we actually made hay. We made it by hand, and then we made it with baling equipment. And at some point we realized that we're transitioning to 12 months of the year grazing. So we stockpile forage and we graze all year long. And we keep about 20 cows, bovines, and that's cows, bull, yearlings, calves. And maybe 2 or 3 weeks of the year, there's snow on the ground with ice on top of it, and it's more convenient, if not necessary, to break squares and feed them that. And we realized that keeping up the equipment for making 400 or 500 bales, small squares a year was more expensive than just buying the small squares. And then we took a page out of Joel's book, which is, if you're working on land that's had its organic matter taken away from it for decades and decades, there's sort of a certain environmental justice restoring some of it if somebody will sell it to you. I think ultimately we need to stop cutting ourselves. I mean, all of us as farmers are going to have to move toward not cutting ourselves that slack. However your listeners feel about questions like peak oil or, climate change or any of those terms that get thrown around, those are all arguable terms, but environmental degradation is in front of us and is not an arguable term. And because all of us who are making ourselves responsible for food are also trying to address that ticking clock, that we can't keep pushing land too hard. Eventually, we're all going to have to figure out how do I not be dependent on somebody else's carbon capture?
Yeah. But at this point where people 90% of farmers don't realize the impact of carbon and are more than happy to export their carbon to you for pennies on the dollar, as I say.
Right.
It's a tough, it's like this year we bought in all our straw. We bought in 1,000 bales of straw, which ended up being, when you weigh it, so it's actually like 17,000 pounds, I think it ended up being. And obviously we are looking to bring that back in-house when we have enough land capacity, but we're growing so fast we don't have that. But at this point, I mean, it's like, okay, they'll sell it to me for X. And there's no way I can produce that because I just don't have the capacity. But you're right. I mean, we need to get back to that aspect of this property is producing and it can. I think that what you're showing is absolutely totally possible. And I think we also need to be thinking about the right amount of stocking too for things. I think that's right.
Stocking numbers are so crucial.
I think
So
the
many
other
people
thing
try
that
to overdo it.
makes the story a totally positive story is this is not a zero-sum game. When we apply good stewardship to a piece of soil, we can actually rob Peter to pay Paul, because Paul is going to do so much with what we pay him that we're going to be able to pay Peter back. It's, you know how it is. If you have a certain amount of fertility, say compost, and you husband it in a small area, you can make that area so productive that it has captured enough carbon. You can then spread the fertility you produced a little bit further. You can grow your fertile space larger and larger with good management.
And that was a lot of what we did at the beginning. It wasn't that we kept our stock numbers very low. So when we started off, it was just a few cows, and we've continued to add numbers to that depending on weather conditions and things like that.
This spring, I looked at some reduced numbers from cows that left the farm and thought, I need to replace those numbers. Well, we've got a drought on our hands, so we're no longer we're in good shape by not having the higher numbers.
Yeah. So did you not get that rain over the last 2 weeks?
No.
No.
Oh
no, it missed.
I wish we could have sent some, because we are now to the point where we are struggling to get crops in the ground because we're so wet.
Wow. Oh yeah. We did not get any of it. We'd hear we were going to get it, and then it wouldn't happen.
Right. Yeah. We had a month drought like you did, and it was brutal. And then we just all of a sudden got dumped on, which is unfortunately, that's the way it's changing. I think the environment is changing, that we're going to get these larger swings. And I think that's another reason why we need to even be more conscious of carbon capture and the organic matter. It's so key.
And especially that we have to be on the ground in place using observational skills all the time. It's unpredictable. But since the events seem to be a little bit more extreme, their impact is greater. We see it a lot in the pasture. It used to be that when it rained, we could just rejoice. Now, when it rains, you also have to get your honey out there and move those cows right now, because they're gonna that first hour in a significant rainfall, the cows can do a lot of damage if you don't get them onto fresh grass right away.
I wanted to go back a second, because you were saying about concentrating all your fertility on a very small section and then expanding that. I think in that principle is really, it's a 1 + 1 = 3, or a 1 + 1 = 4.
Right.
I see people that try to have a 4-acre garden and they get less food than I can on an eighth of an acre.
Right.
That's right.
Because the management.
That's
right. I can't remember there was a book written as American market gardener at the end of the 1800s. I think it was, there are all those books with the similar names like 2 Acre Eden and 5 Acres and Independence. And I know it was neither of those, but it was something like that. And he was writing about different market gardeners in the New York area at the time. And one was a German who moved on to the worst piece of land in the neighborhood. And then he dug a pit in the yard, and everything, including human waste, went into that pit. And then he added road dust, I think which was his available sort of dry matter. And the farmer writing the story tells about how incredibly fertile this guy's farm was, as he takes this very rich compost, spreads it on a small area, grows a lot that year, and then is able to put all of his waste back in the compost pit, and then on another area the next year. And because he's increasing the fertility by such a big percentage each time, he doesn't have to continually restore fertility to the original spot.
Yeah. Could that have been the Principles of Vegetable Gardening by Liberty Hyde Bailey? I think that was published in 1901.
It wasn't Bailey. It was somebody without a reputation. He was a guy who moved. He was a New Yorker who moved out of the city and said, I'm going to grow small fruits and market them in the city, and did that successfully. When our house burned, a lot of our books went by the way. So I don't remember what that was.
Yes. Yeah. That actually, we live in an 1897 house, and it has some very, very old wiring in it. And that is a constant concern. And now that I think of it, probably that would be the biggest concern, is my books.
Yeah, right. It's the books. We did save most of them, but they're in storage now. And our house
Yeah.
burned. It was electrical, but it was an exploding lithium ion battery in a battery charger. Yep.
Oh my
They blow
gosh.
up.
So that's another thing to think about on your farm of the ion batteries are very necessary for some things,
Absolutely.
but maybe have them outside in their
That's
own
right.
little spot.
That's right.
That's
Yeah.
right. Even if it's the garage, you have a lot of value
Yeah.
in your garage, but if you can just plug in your
Yeah,
cordless tools out there.
that is a good tip right there. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about, we've kind of hit fertility. We've talked about the system. So now we've got that. Let's talk about the players in the system and kind of what obviously there's a lot of cows out there. And I did a podcast, I forget who it was with, but her biggest thing was that many of the cows out there currently and pigs are not suited for these systems because they're not adapted. So talk through a little bit about like what that adaptation is and where can folks look for those types of genetics?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that we would say is adapting your ruminant to the pasture that you have.
You mean choosing a ruminant?
Choosing a ruminant, right. So that you are not putting a cow on goat food, but that you are actually putting a cow on cow food. And then in terms of selection for the cow, we're looking at topography. We're looking at what kind of, again, what kind of pasture you have. We're finding that a Dexter is a pretty versatile animal. We started with Jerseys. They're great. Again, we like the smaller ones, not Holsteins or something like that. They do well. The Jerseys have a tendency to be a little bit more, they want to be pampered a little bit more.
They're divas?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little
A little bit of that.
I would say what's significant. Lots of times people ask us what's our favorite breed, and we'll usually sort of cavil and not answer the question because it's so much of it is an individual question. The most popular modern commercial dairy breeds have in the last 60 years been bred for massive size and production and grain tolerance. So the genetic, you buy a Holstein, she's a Holstein. She does come from the Holstein, sort of genetic story, but she's the product of many generations of selection for some qualities you don't want. So we tend to say you're looking for the smaller end, the ones that haven't been morphed, to be 2 stories tall. And the ones whose frame is in balance. Modern dairy farmers, for very good reasons, are after an animal whose body actually requires the minimum of maintenance and who will take most of the calories she consumes and turn them into milk. We're after an animal who is, first of all, a successful individual in her species, an animal who can eat, walk around, reproduce, feed the animal that feed the product of her reproduction, and then put milk in the bucket, because what we're trying to build is a healthy ecosystem. That ecosystem will then, in addition to all the other important things it does for itself and for the other members of the ecosystem, it will produce an excess of milk that we can use. So body type, we tend to go for a smaller animal. We would tend not to look at those dairy breeds that lean off to the fashionable skeletal look of a commercial dairy cow, but an animal that even in lactation carries some reserve weight on her body. We, especially in our hilly topography, we're looking for a short-legged, but not chondroplastic, not dwarf animal, but a short-legged animal whose center of gravity is low enough that she's less likely to tip. And then over the years, we just observed that animals like Dexters, who come from not how do we produce the most milk situation, but how do we have a tri-purpose animal, meat, milk, and draft, have not been, they're not looking for refined feeds. We had Dexters and Jerseys in the herd at the same time, and we noticed that if you turn them all into a new paddock, the Jerseys would go for the more commercially acceptable forages like orchard grass and clover. And the dexters would go chew on a tree branch. Yet they performed as milk animals pretty similarly, because a Jersey, of course, is a high production animal only if you're shoving a lot of refined carbs in the front end. If she's just eating cellulose and she's hustling her own grub, she produces a normal amount of milk from a normal, not engorged or over-enlarged udder. And the dexters really kept up with them, even in components, even in things like butterfat. The dexters were producing a very rich, very high components milk in good quantity. So we began breeding them together.
So you've crossed those two then?
Yes, right.
So we have,
and we've been happy with what we're getting.
Right. So we have some 3/4, we have some 50/50s, and then some that are like 3/4, 1/4 in either direction. And of late, people have been breeding those together and giving them names: Belfair, Irish Jersey. And we're not really, a breed has not yet been established. We're just doing crosses.
Yeah. And I think the big thing too is, when you think about these cows that are so high off the ground, people don't realize, but gravity is always at play here.
Yeah.
And the higher that cow has to get up, that's energy expended in getting that cow up.
Right.
So
and if she goes down, if she goes down and her weight is, if she's on a slope and her weight is on the lower end, she can't fight that to get herself back up. And a tipped cow is a dead cow unless you get to her very quickly.
Yes. Yeah. My sister had a Holstein when we were young. She was helping friends of ours, was given the cow. That cow it was incredible, because the amount of milk that thing produced, it was 5 gallons a day at times. And that was without grain. And we were shocked. The farmer was shocked, because again, they were like, well, you have to feed her this, you got to feed her this. And we're just going to put pasture. But I think the biggest thing that was really incredible about this is that the guy that did our hay, so he would come and mow the hay every year. And one year, after several years of the cows, and we had goats too and some sheep, he stopped and he was just like, what fertilizer are you putting on this? He says, this started out the worst field I mowed. And he said, now it's the best field. And he really wanted to know our fertility program. And I was like, the cow.
That's
and he's
right.
like, no. He's like, what are you putting on it? I was like, the cow.
Right.
That's a great story. And I think those are the stories that especially all of us want, is why we share information, is to help. Most of us start from a place of no information and just this
or misinformation.
Worse, misinformation.
Oh, that's bigger. Yeah.
And then with this impulse to be directly responsible for some part of our own care and maintenance. And we just need some encouragement like that, like your statement that this cow went on to an all grass diet. She improved the pasture and produced abundant milk.
Yeah. One of the things that when we're speaking to homesteaders, we say, one of the most important steps for you is believing that this system will work.
Yeah, right.
Because it's hard to, especially when you're starting off with really bad fields, which is what's left out there. I mean, you look at it and you think this is not working, but if you stay with it, if you're patient, it will improve.
I think the other thing we all have a problem with in our culture is death. We hide it, we avoid it whenever it's possible. But in any ecosystem, let's remember it's birth, reproduction, death, and decay. And without the death and decay part, there wouldn't be an ecosystem. Stuff's supposed to die, but man, does it make us panic when it happens.
Yeah, and obviously some of that death is going to be us induced, and some of that's just going to be ecosystem induced.
Right.
And I think the when ecosystem causes it, that can really scare us because it's sudden, it's not planned. And I think part of us too, as humans, a good human would be opposed to as much suffering as possible.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes in ecosystem death, there is more suffering than we'd like to see.
Right.
And but yeah, that's something like our kids we don't raise animals on the farm because we're so small and we're in the city limits. But that was actually literally a discussion yesterday in the car is that we want an animal. And then it's gonna be like, well, with an animal, there's gonna be the whole cycle, guys.
That's right.
It's just
Right.
it's just not gonna be. There is possums and there is ducks was the one brought up. And I was like, there's possums, there's skunks, there's raccoons. There is gonna be death, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah. Let's move on to the pigs, because that one to me is something that I think you kind of expanded my knowledge right here a little bit with the aspect that pigs will, gorge themselves, put on a bunch of weight, and then just kind of like hunker down when there's not as much food. Do you find different breeds do better? Kind of what's your thoughts and what's your plan been on that?
Well, we bred pigs for a little while. We had Durocs. And one of the things we realized, could have done this math ahead of time, but didn't, that of course, if you keep breeding stock, you're feeding them year round and you're not butchering them. On a farm, a small family-sized subsistence farm where you're only, there's a limit to how much biomass, perishable surplus you're producing. If you have to feed 2 adult pigs with that, you've just pulled 2 pigs off the list of things you can butcher that year, right? Those 2. So we began buying piglets from a local friend who raises club pigs. He keeps 12 sows, covers them with boars, sells club pigs, and then what's left he sells as feeder pigs. And so we'll just we buy total for our community, we buy about 9, 10 piglets a year. And some of those go to a group project that isn't under our management. And the rest we keep on the farm, and we just feed them farm surplus. And they're bacon and lard pig crosses, nothing fancy. We've seen people move toward IPPs and coonies with the statement, they don't root. And I think we always think yet. They haven't rooted yet. I think there might be something to be said for them, but when you have to grow out a pig for 2 years on grass to get a 150-pound carcass, when you could run that grass through a cow, get milk, feed the milk to your family, feed the surplus to a pig along with the other waste, and get a 250-pound carcass in 10 months, 12 months. Then that's a more that's definitely a nutrient pathway that's just more productive for the farm. So we keep the bigger pig crosses, nothing special, and they produce really well for us.
Yeah, and my in-laws did have coonies, and there was definitely the berm.
There was the what?
The berm. So, like when you put the pigs and they have the fence, they have the 2 strands, there was still that berm pushed up all the way around.
Right.
Like maybe they're not rooting it, but they're still the berm, folks.
They're doing something to it. Right. So we were on a farm in Idaho a couple of weeks ago, and they've had coonies there for how long do they?
He had them there for a long time.
Yeah, a couple, 3 years. They've had coonies on there. And they're still tweaking the whole mix, getting the pigs to reproduce, getting the pigs to mother well, and then feeding them out to a reasonable slaughter weight. If there wasn't such if we didn't have cows, ruminants, who can break down cellulose and make that energy accessible to us, the coonie answer would look like it made sense. It's a very slow way of growing proteins and fats, but it works. Yeah. But because you can use a ruminant to turn cellulose into food, and then feed surplus dairy products to big pigs, and produce compost at the same time, that's for us. That's just a nutrient cycle that makes more sense.
Yeah, and back to the cows, you did mention goats, and like some people may have a property that may need several years of goats.
Absolutely.
And then get rid of them as quickly as you can.
He doesn't like goats. We started out with goats. We had goats for about 8 years.
And we tethered them and we moved them. And they did miraculous things, because what they do is they're hitting all the briars, all the things that don't do well under grazing, and they leave grass. So it was great system.
We haven't had goats since about 1004, and I think we're about due for some goats to reduce our.
Yeah, we bring goats
liability.
on periodically, and we're reminded why we don't want goats.
I don't want.
Yes. Yeah. We definitely had goats. We had Nubians, we had some Alpines. We brought home 2 goats one day from a farm. They rode in the car with us, the van with us. And then when we got to the farm, they immediately escaped the car. And we spent the next 3 hours trying to get them in their pen.
Yeah.
Those things are incredibly fast.
I think what's so annoying to human beings is that goats are actually smarter than we are.
Oh, yeah.
Sheep are not.
Absolutely.
Sheep are not.
We had sheep too. Yes, they are the opposite. Yes. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit. You guys have a book out. Talk about your book a little bit and kind of what was the rationale behind it?
We were looking for as Beth was saying, how did Grandpa used to farm this way? So we were looking for the book that would teach us, how did Grandpa used to farm? How did he, feed the animals without feed stores? And we looked and looked, and we did a lot of experimentation, and we did a lot of gleaning from books that would hint at suggestions. Here's how things worked. And over the years, we started developing what now we call God's pattern. God put us in a garden and said, manage this thing. And we feel like that we are discovering a way of doing that God didn't put us in there as a trick and say, I'm going to put him in there, but you can't really do this. He put us in there because it would work. And so we've been chipping away at trying to discover that. So we had started speaking at different conferences, and at one point somebody turned to us and yelled from the audience, "Where's the book?" And we thought, that's a very interesting idea. So we pitched the idea to Chelsea Green, assuming that we would.
Yeah. We sent them a proposal thinking I had done some writing for children early in our marriage. And so I knew that the process was you start at the top and you get rejections until you reach a certain level and maybe you get picked up. So we just were starting at the top. They're Elliot Coleman's publisher. They partner with Joel Salatin. So we knew they were the top. And in this is the age of digital proposals now. In 24 hours, they were back to us and said, we think this looks like a really good book, but we don't want to derail your project, but what we really want is a big how-to book.
We had written more of a philosophical approach to this, and they had just had somebody more or less do that, and they said, we want a how-to, and we said, well,
is there even a market for a how-to? Because we had been accustomed at that point to speaking. We began speaking because there was a point where we realized we'd had like some major aha moments. All life energy is solar energy. Cows, ruminants turn daily sunlight into daily proteins, fats, and sugars. Ruminants don't need grain. Rotating makes grass grow. Those were the things that sort of they took us from stumbling in the dark with that nagging sense of, I haven't really figured this out. I don't have a working organism yet. They took us to the point where we realized, okay, now we know how this organism works. And it's just a question of spending the rest of our life learning how to fine tune. And we looked at each other and said, there are people trying to homestead and quitting after 2 or 3 years for want of this information. So we began to teach. And
what our book we hope does is somebody picks up this book, can start off with land and not know what they're doing, but they could read this book and say, okay, if I follow this method, I should be able to have abundance, I should be able to feed myself, and I shouldn't have to be using inputs.
Right.
I should be able to do this.
And it won't happen instantly,
no. I don't think the book promises that. Yeah, that's right.
It's the principles behind it. And I think anybody in a in an area not already extremely brittle can settle down to manage a small area with the animals appropriate to that setting. And the land, the animals, the climate are going to teach them everything they need to know. That's how humanity is still here, from whatever origins, on whatever spot on the planet. We're here because of our ability to analyze what's going on in an ecosystem and enhance it so that that ecosystem produces an abundance for us as well.
I mean, what we were seeing when we were starting out and trying to find the book that would help us is all the commercial methods, and all they are is for the small farm, it's the commercial methods downsized. That's right. So you get chickens, you go buy feed, and now you're off and running, and you get really wonderful eggs, but they're very expensive eggs.
And in the last 10 years or so, alternative agriculture has begun to produce books of a better caliber, proposing something else. But I think what's often, even almost always missing, is the whole system view. You'll see Harvey Essery's got a wonderful book on the small scale poultry flock, and is full of great information. It doesn't give you the whole farm picture of harvesting local sunlight and rainfall to produce all the food, feed, fertility, and fuel on the farm. But it gives you a lot of great information on chickens. What we wanted was to help people see that one big picture. Because up to that point, we'd had to sneak in the dairy cow, in the back door of any talk. We knew people were going to say, I'm not doing that. And then when Chelsea Green said, let's make a big book about this, we said, is there a market for that? People don't want to hear how to get up at 5 a.m, milk a cow. And they said, trust us, there's a market. And they were right.
Yeah, that's really expanding now as we speak, that over and over again, people are saying we have the milk cow.
Right. Oh, yeah, it's been wonderful. Like over the past 10 years, watching the United States going from a family cow free zone to, if we're speaking to 500 people and we say, anybody have a family dairy cow yet? A lot of hands go up.
Yeah. It's going to be a tough one around here.
Yeah, it is harder in Dayton, although there are.
Well, no, I just did the years of 4 a.m. minus 20 degrees.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to get the milking machine to work. And so I've been scarred for.
Okay, well, throw out the milking machine and just milk one cow. The whole thing will get a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, now I have kids, and my wife is the one that wants the cow.
Yeah.
So as long as she's responsible for it, that's good. But we're still in the children bearing period of her life too. So, when that next baby comes, I know that for 4 or 5 months, I would be the one solely on that. So
How old is your oldest child?
She's 9.
Yeah, well, she's almost milking age.
The other thing is, how much milk would those kids drink if you let them?
Oh, they already go through 2 gallons plus a week. And I know that would triple because I have an 7-year-old boy, and he would triple his intake if we gave it to him. Or
so that is one of the great selling points for the reluctant spouse, whichever it is suddenly you've got unlimited milk, which substitutes, you don't realize how much of your diet will become dairy based if you have it. But unlimited milk for the children, for the chore of going out and squeezing this cow once a day. And then if you calf share, you've got a backup milker. So we almost never leave a calf, turn a cow over to her calf to be milked, because we're just here. There are enough of us. We can get the milking done. We have plenty of neighbors who, when they're on vacation or when there's some family reunion coming up, will simply let the calf do the milking 24/7 while they're busy, and then start separating the calf and milking mom in the morning as soon as the event's over.
Yeah. So, okay, I think we backed in this question backwards, but I guess the question comes down to be that reluctant spouse. You've given a couple options. A, go to once a day. You could go to once a day.
Absolutely.
Second, calf share, which is where the calf is doing some of the milkings for you.
Right.
And then you could always, have a neighbor or somebody if you are going to be out of town. I'm sure there's a fair number of people that would love to get their hands on some raw milk.
One of the things that we're seeing as we do farm consults is more and more multi-generational farms, which are fabulous. And this could be multi-generational. It could be multi-neighbor farms.
We're seeing that too, like
where
a family cow owned by 3 families.
Right. So you can really share and you come in. The only thing you have to make sure is that the other people who are in this group milk as well as you do, because you can have issues if you're not getting cows milked all the way out.
Another thing that helps, I think, we've watched in the last 15 years the objection to the family dairy cow go from enormous to nothing. In many cases, people are excited about having a family dairy cow. But I think one of the things that makes people really shrink from it is the feeling that the commitment is huge. And we often try and explain to people, like, if a quarter of that animal's weight in beef would cost what the cow costs, you can't lose, right? Even if you get this animal, you don't like it, it's not working, you can just stick her in the pasture, let her eat grass, and butcher at the end of the summer, and you're still on top of it. And that usually means that you can spend $3,000 on a dairy cow, and if she doesn't work out for you, big deal. So you can eat her for dinner, and it'll be some of the best $10 a pound, sirloin and ground beef you ever ate. So it's not the commitment people think it is. People are afraid of large animals. They're afraid of the guilt that you feel when you take on a project and then you say, I didn't really want to do that anyway. They're afraid of the expense. And we always tell people, $50 will buy you a really high quality stainless steel milking bucket, and your hands are yours for free. So the equipment doesn't need to be expensive. It's really just not, it's not that titanic thing we think of it as being. You could try it and quit.
I think too is that you've made it more accessible for people. So I think you're right, because the original books were, you got to do this, 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 and you're like, nope. It's a lot easier than you think.
Right.
So I think that is part of the issue too.
And
because
actually,
I mean, seriously,
the simpler methods produce a whole picture. It's not just that, we can make this job easier, but that a cow on grass is way less susceptible to mastitis because she's producing the amount of milk her metabolism reasonably can produce on her normal diet. When you start shoving grain in the front end and to get a whole lot more milk out of the back end, now you have that cow that is mastitis prone, is more likely to get milk fever, is more likely to, in fact, the other is, it's impossible for a cow just on grass, there's no grain on the farm, to break into the feed room and die of overeating on grain. Whereas in a grain situation, that's definitely one of the possibilities. The whole thing gets easier as soon as we say to ourselves, there's the grass. Ruminants, including deer, are already out there eating it. This ruminant can eat it, and if I'll show up and squeeze the back end of her once a day, she'll also give me milk. And then I can power my farm with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Symbiotic.
Yes.
What are you guys excited about now?
Well, the house burned down a year ago. So a lot of focus. When our house burned down, we have 8 children. Everyone, so 6 boys, 2 girls. They're all really good carpenter / finish framer. We have a timber framer, an architect, a stonemason. So that's a really fun project. But what it's meant is that a lot of the family is focused on the house. And our second daughter, Anna, and I are the primary farmers anyway, but especially now.
I do think that one thing that's happening is I'm now on farm all the time. And there have been a lot of things where we've had project, and the house is a huge project. But now we're able to focus more and more on just the farm. And so it's getting a little bit tidier and a little bit cleaner and a little bit more efficient. And so those are some of the things. We are not moving toward making more money from the farm. That's not a goal for us.
It's always seemed more important to us to learn how the organism works first. And that's what we try and help other people figure out. The methods that we use are being used in places to produce excess on a bigger piece of land for sale. We're still in the trenches doing the research. How does this work? What is the nature of the organism? And we used to tell people that trying to build a farm, because it's a whole systems thing, many systems that make one whole system, it's like moving into a junkyard and trying to build a Boeing 747 with no blueprint out of spare parts while flying it across the Atlantic, because you need it to be up and running even before you have the parts in place. Yeah, I'm watching you laugh because you know how true this is.
Yes. Hey, garlic lovers. Here at the Farm on Central, garlic is one of our staple overwinter crops. We use it in everything: garlic salt, infused honey, fire cider, you name it. But now you can grow your very own garlic straight from our farm to your garden. We offer seed garlic with 3 amazing varieties: Music, German White, and German Red. These guys thrive in zones 2 to 7, and with a little extra care, they'll do great in zones 8 and 9 too. Plus, we've got free shipping on our 1, 3, and 10-pound bags and discounts for bigger orders. Get your seed garlic today at shop.farmoncentral.com and get ready for your own fresh garlic harvest next summer. Happy planting. We're in year 3 of our business, which has grown 3 times faster than we thought it would. Yeah. And so it's constant construction. And you're right. You're trying to fly it while you're moving. You know, you've got a guy hammering a board up here while someone's underneath trying to process some lettuce, and that doesn't work out too well.
Right. So this farm at this point is a flying machine. It has all its parts. It gets us where we need to go. Everything on it's pretty happy and thriving.
Yeah, we're very happy with the fertility systems. They seem to be working. And we were in our garden. So although we have not had rain for quite a while, we're harvesting potatoes, and we're expecting to be in really tough clay. It's amazing the difference in the soil that we're able to easily dig it out.
There's about 15 buckwheat crops incorporated in that soil.
Right. So we feel like we're moving in the right direction. And I think we're just interested in getting fewer inputs, again, with our chickens. And
as you see the parts begin to click together, you can recognize you know that feeling that when you get it right, you feel the pushback, you feel the solidness of the thing that you've done.
Yeah.
And that's there. So now we're in that stage that you go through when you say, I know how this works. Now let's begin to tinker with the pieces so that it takes less time, flows more smoothly, breaks down less often. So I think the thing I'm most excited about for this summer, besides always finding grazing and moving cows and watching the response of the soil, that for me is endlessly exciting. But I'm excited to see our water systems go from many temporary systems that require a lot of hose schlepping to we're putting in some black pipe and
awesome.
And poissons, so that we can deliver water to more places. It's all captured rainwater or spring water. It's all gravity fed. And now we're making permanent some of our temporary extensions so that I'm hauling fewer hoses less of the time.
Yeah, I mean, we've started, our whole process has been start with temporary, because when people start with permanent, they invariably put things in the wrong place.
Right.
But if you start with temporary and you live with temporary for a number of years, then at some point you say, okay, we've been doing this now for a long time, we can start making this a little bit more permanent.
I think Joel says don't do anything permanent till year 3, and the permaculture people say something similar. And I would say that, let's see, we've known pretty certainly that water system ought to be permanent for at least 5 years.
Right.
So we're finally getting around to putting in hard pipe.
Right. We're finding the time to do that.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I absolutely think, and it always too is that aspect of early in the farm, you typically have way more time than money.
Yes.
And then, so because you just don't have the scales, the production, the systems in place yet to sell all this product. So you're still kind of like trying to figure it all out. But after a while, you start to get to the point where now you can spend that capital, those capital dollars, because now you've got the system in place and you're moving enough throughput that you just need to get stuff, more efficient.
Right.
That's
when you say, I'm going to buy the right tool this time.
Yes. Instead of, 6 tools, you're going to buy the one tool that you're
That's
going to
right.
get. Yeah. One thing you did say a little earlier, just like this, a farm is such a large living organism. I literally walked out today to get the crew started this morning, and I saw a Coca-Cola truck go by, and I just had a fleeting thought. It was like, oh my gosh, how simple would it be to just take some coloring and some sugar and throw it in water? And that was my business model.
Yeah.
Right.
But how unfulfilling, obviously.
Well, wait a minute, though. You could then go out and invest in dialysis units all over the country and like pick up some more cash. You're fixing the problem you're creating. That would work.
Yes. Well, our local children's hospital network, we had to take it in for some stitches. And after I realized how easy it was, I was like, I could do this. But anyway, we'll leave that there. But it was $3,000 for 9 stitches.
Yep.
Oh my word.
And then I went back and I said, well, let me dive into the finances of this organization, because it's a nonprofit, so everything's public. And I look at the year-end report and how many billions of dollars and everything. But I realized, I believe they made $20 million in just interest.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So you have to realize, based on that, of how many billions of dollars they actually have in the bank.
Yeah.
And they also do a massive fundraising arm, because not only do they charge you for this, but people then give them money because of how sick everyone is and the sob stories that they can tell. It was just incredibly eye-opening and made me very, very angry.
It makes you realize how big the medical industry is. And then if you really do extend that to, why are we sick? Why do people need all that care? Where does it land you? It lands you right in the food production system.
And then you realize that what you're doing with producing a premium quality food is literally the number one thing that you can do to change how our community lives.
Oh, absolutely. And how do you convince people of that? And how do you convince that the food that we have from our farm is a completely different thing than what you buy at Aldi's or Kroger's? Or it's a tough, I was just reading something about, is it Georgia?
What?
The farmer, he does all of this wonderful things. He's been selling to Whole Foods and stuff like that. And he said, we were really believing that our farm was going to change how people lived. And then it kind of plateaued. And now I feel like it's going back down. And I had the same response when we had gone to a conference. You've got these people that are saying, we're going to get a milk cow. You really feel like you're starting to make a change. And then it's one trip to a Walmart parking lot. And you realize
the nation is still a Walmart nation.
Yeah, it's definitely. Yeah. And what is it that Walmart sells better than anybody else? What Kroger sells is convenience, not nutrition, not anything else, but I'll actually deliver this to your door. Now that's hard to beat when you're talking about people who have grown up on convenience. How do you convince them that convenience is not as important as nutrition? And
you have to look at the average American who they work a 9-to-5 job. On Saturday, the dad golfs, the mom takes the kids to the pool, and then Sunday, maybe they go to church, maybe they don't, but that's their only day. And then you're asking them to give up the sports, give up the golf, then have a cow.
That's right.
And unfortunately, that doesn't fly in the HOA, for starters.
Right.
But it doesn't fly in the, again, I'm just spitballing here. I don't know. We call it the virtual HOA or the relationship HOA, or, are you now too weird for your friend group?
Right. Oh yeah, there's that. Right. That definitely happens too.
Because it's not wrong, and it's completely okay to have a kid who has multiple diseases or multiple health issues and take them to 4 or 5 different doctors a week and all this stuff. And everyone's like gets on the meal train, which you're getting lots of wonderful Campbell goodness there. But we just the dichotomies. It's just, and when you see how these dichotomies stack, you're just like, wow.
Right. Well, it's like a home birth thing. If you take responsibility for your own pregnancy, labor, and delivery, you study up, you realize that statistically you're better off at home than you would be in a hospital, and you take responsibility for it. No, but a very small number of people will cheer you on. And if anything goes wrong, everybody's going to blame you. But on the other hand, if you go in and say, I want a planned cesarean section just for convenience sake, and something goes wrong, nobody blames you. There is no
personal responsibility,
moral premium in taking responsibility for yourself from the general public. But I have noticed, and I'm especially seeing this in the 20-somethings and under, I think that they have been born into a big enough mess that they're looking at it and saying, this is a mess. Enough of them are sick. They're doing the math and realizing their own opportunity, the possibility that they will give, if they have children, they'll have children with some serious problems. That possibility is quite real and many, many times greater than it was 20 years ago. I think that they're beginning to detect the lie. And so they're beginning to think maybe we have to take responsibility for some of these things.
I think a lot of things are happening. And we're recording this June 15th. So obviously the events in the last 72 hours are coming to play.
July 15th.
Yeah.
July 15th. Yeah. Sorry, July 15th.
Life's interesting.
Your life is very interesting. But I think what we notice is that the legacy media has lied to us and has lied to us for decades. But I don't think until the last 5 years, last 3 years especially, that people have woken up to it. But literally the fact that you could take headlines the last 3 days of what was being said about the exact same thing and just say like, but what?
That's right.
It was, and the fact that they aren't getting fact checked over this, the fact that they can still run this and they're okay with it. I mean, look at you the eye and say, oh yeah. And it's like, but that's not what happened. But so people are waking up to this and people are realizing that they have been I mean, they're in a matrix, really, is what I think.
That's right. They're stuck in the matrix.
Yes. And so the matrix is now breaking, fracturing massively, which is really good. And so there's two camps now, I think. And I think the middle is starting to get a lot bigger, which is actually good. It used to be the fringe over here that the government is just everything and a bowl of nuts, that the government was going to completely take care of you. And then you have the people over here that are the conspiracy theorists and, don't trust anybody. And then you had everyone in the middle who was more just going about life. But I feel like that the blur across that whole spectrum is changing so dramatically right now. And I just hope that as leaders in the space that we, A, can give them the support they need, and B, because I think the other thing I do see sometimes happen is someone start down to be very transparent and try to be really helpful, but then go in some weird direction. And I've seen this happen multiple times. And
leaders or the people who are getting into it?
Both.
There's
one person in particular that I was thinking that I'm just like, you literally just shot yourself in the foot with a lot of good that you could have had. And so that's just, I guess my, I'm on a soapbox here and this is your interview, not mine, but.
I was interested though. Are we talking about how easy it is for somebody to get into something and make it look slick and then sort of get in the way of people who might actually make progress if they weren't being distracted by that information.
Yeah, there's that. And then there's also tearing other people in the same movement that you are down just for likes and views.
So I think a lot of that is that in the world of clicks, it is a competitive world. People are out there trying to get more clicks. If they're clicking on, anybody only has just so many waking hours to click in. And so there's some competition there. The great thing about farming is there isn't any. This is, like sun shines here, it shines everywhere else. You can collect your own sunshine, and it doesn't have to be competitive. And so I think you're right that what's going to be helpful is more and more good information put out there in ways that can't be sort of bled off into that competitive, more clicks for you.
Yeah.
For me.
And I think
go ahead.
The really important thing about your message is that you're not taking commercial scale and just making it smaller, like you said earlier, because unfortunately, as you scale down systems, they inherently typically get more expensive.
That's right.
And so your eggs are now costing you a dollar an egg. And the average homeowner can't afford that, or household can't afford that. So the fact that your message is, okay, how do we simplify this? How do we make it cheaper? How do we make it more economical? I think is so important.
Well, I was going to
and stepping out of the whole economic system and saying, how can, every time I see money going off my farm, what we look at is, was there a way that the farm could have provided that? And so that has really kind of driven an awful lot of our choices and not just in farming, but in lifestyle. So that when we have had, we bought an old house and it's having problems, how do we fix that? We can either bring in somebody and solve it with money, or we can figure that out. And it's been the source of why my children have so many skills, is that that's how we handle things. How can we do that? And it's why I think homeschooling is so fabulous, is the greatest thing that's come out of it is problem solving. My kids are fabulous problem solvers, way beyond us, that when we'll have a tendency to kind of throw in the towel, and they'll say, no, wait, there's a way to do this. And they're not intimidated the way that I still am a product of
conventional schooling.
What happened after World War II, that there are people who are experts, and that's who you ask. And my kids would have a tendency to say, no, somebody built this. I can fix it.
Right. Their attitude is no problem is too big. And I think that, you were saying what we can bring to the public arena is good information without competition. And I think those are really important. And then the third thing I think you just touched on, which is, this is really, really fun. We're in a dire, I would say our culture, we as the American people, we even as the West or the world, are in a very dire place. And we could devote hours to that conversation, and we won't. But that dire place is happening in a world that's actually beautiful, abundant, resilient, life-filled, and still accessible to us just for paying attention, showing up, and doing the work. And we are having a great time. Better in our age gap, we're in our 60s. People our age didn't see this possibility before them. We're fairly anomalous. There are, in the wide world of alternative ag, there are a good many couples in our age group, but in the country as a whole, no.
Yeah.
But we're having a great time. And that's what really excites me about the events we go to now, is that our public changed radically in the last couple of years before COVID. All of a sudden, there was a lot of interest in the country from young people, professionals, families in home food production. And it was a joyful interest. It was an interest that said, basically, I think the road that's been mapped out for me by the educational system and the technocracy looks deadly. But this other thing, this possibility of living in the natural world with plants and animals and partnering with them to make an abundant ecosystem, looks like a blast.
And it creates so much anxiety, that other system, that I have to wait on the government to solve my problems. I have to
earn cash to solve everything.
Right. And then when you start owning it and say, a tremendous amount of anxiety goes away, because I'm in charge now.
Right.
As I think we're meant to be.
Well, not only that, I mean, so you do think of how you feel about food, and how for your life, food is an element like air or water that's all around you. And all you have to do is go harvest it and prepare it, and you're fed. That isn't the normal American's association with food. It's a constant, I have to earn money to get it. I have to earn more money to get healthier food. I have to earn even more money so that I can, have the very best food or the superfood. And all of that is erased for the person who will tend an ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, we have been pre-programmed as a consumer, not a producer.
Yes,
and so if you
right.
can start to tell people, look, you can be a producer. And when you become a producer, now you don't have to listen to their system, because their system is you have to go to school to get a 4-year degree. Then you can then spend the next 10 years paying off. And then your wife or significant other also has to produce so that the kids can go to a daycare, because that's the best way to educate them, so that they can then turn around and do the exact same thing. We're pawns in this massive
there's your matrix
conspiracy.
That's right. Yes. That's right. We are just techno-industrial fodder for their mills. But the minute we have 2 acres under us that we can manage the sunlight and rainfall on, we're independent.
Now, what's fascinating, we are getting ready to go to Millersfield, Ohio, to an Amish event. And what we're going to be speaking on is home everything. So we're still trying to sort out exactly what that means, home everything. But the Amish are bringing us in to speak on this because they are
on small scale subsistence.
They're moving the other direction.
They haven't been doing it for a while, and so people Amish reliably tell us that your generation is less than 10% on the land. Less than 10% of the Amish of your generation are farming.
Whoa!
I know that was our response too.
Right.
I spoke for Natural Hope Herbals, and they have a field day for their in Pennsylvania.
Who was that for?
That's for Natural Hope Herbals. They're herbal supplement and company, and they have a field day. So they brought me in to speak to their retailers about marketing. But we were there for both days, and it's fascinating to me. You think of Amish, you think, horse and buggy, no telephone, all that kind of stuff. But the modern Amish there's a wide range in what they're allowed to do.
Sure is.
Right.
So, I mean, some of the Amish have electricity. Some of them have phones.
But agriculture was still the core of
their identity.
Right. Not necessarily how they made money, but it was the core of their culture. And they are losing that. And what we, another thing that we are excited about is our goal, why we speak, is that we want to have 1 million little tiny farms all over this country. And if that happened, little independent farms, 5 acres, 10 acres, it would transform this country. This country would be a totally different country if that's where we were as a culture, as a people.
And a comment on that is that as small a percentage as we all know the homestead movement represents, a small percentage of the American people as it represents, it's still an awful lot of people. And when we go, we speak about once a month, various places in the country at at medium to large homesteading events, and the hands that are going up for people who have a dairy cow or getting ready to have a dairy cow, it's just, I find it so exciting because we're seeing a tiny fraction of the number of people.
That's a big commitment. It is a big thing to do that. It's one thing to put in a garden, and we do that. But when you say, I'm going to get a milk cow, and I know what that means, or I know something of what that means, that's people who are serious. And
on top of that, though, however big the human commitment is, when we say, I'm going to get a cow, I'm going to manage this big animal, and I'm going to show up every day and milk her, the difference she's going to make to the food economy and the whole, the entire household economy for that family is 10 times the difference it's going to make in their chore list or in their commitment to being there. And I think that's even a conservative estimate. It's many, many times as big. Those are huge changes toward stability, toward health. And that's a really good thing.
I love to think about just how many more people are now going to be drinking raw milk, which we know
Yes.
is
Right.
so good for you, and how many
Right.
FDA agents are going to lose their minds.
Right. Right. Right.
Which one do you like better, the health or the agents losing their mind?
Well, I mean, it's one of those, goes back to that whole matrix things. When they're properly bought in, they think that, the worst of the worst. So we had the ODA visit us this year because we were a PMA and we produce our own wellness products. And very interesting, the whole thing. Obviously, I can only say so much about that. I'll probably at some point just go through the whole thing and do a podcast on just that. But one of the things I said to the inspector, because the final inspector that I actually talked to, because obviously at a certain point, you just hold them off, you hold them off, you hold them off. And then eventually you get your ducks in a row and then you have the conversation. The conversation was, hey, you and I could go out and have a beer if we drank beer. You seem like a very nice guy. Your wife is a special needs teacher. You've got, 2 kids, 9 and 7. And I'm sure we would have a great time going out. And his background was the food industry. And he got so upset at the inspectors that came and inspected him. He said, I want to go be a good inspector. And I kind of chuckled and I said, dude, you just realized, but you became the beast.
Yeah.
And I said,
funny.
You seem like his name was Jeremy. And I said, you're a great guy. And I said, look, we have chosen to opt out because you are the beast. And I said, there's no way I said, like, you would cost us tens of thousands of dollars. I know it's over $30,000 it cost us to comply.
Yeah.
And obviously I didn't tell him certain things because I wasn't going to give away anything more than I had to.
Right.
But I was like, all we want to do is heal people. And people are getting healed by taking the things that we offer.
Mhm.
But I don't have an extra $30,000 to comply. And then hours every month for you to show up and do your inspections and all this. So we've chosen to opt out of the system.
By being a PMA.
By being a PMA. And thankfully, he got the documentation, looked at it and says, yep, okay. And he left because there's nothing they could do.
That's great.
That's exactly how it works. So, and we had really good expertise behind that. So if folks do want to do a PMA, they have to be very careful because there's a lot of charlatans out there that will steer them wrong.
Mhm.
Right.
So you definitely want to be careful with that. And there are people out there that will put you in jail. Not on purpose.
Do you
but
have any recommendations to make as far as what's a good resource for people who are looking at PMAs?
Yes. Yeah. The folks out of Texas, Pro Advocate are the only people that I would work with on PMAs. Yeah. So
where
that's
in
the
Texas?
only people.
Do you know?
I forget exactly where they are, but but as long as you look up Pro Advocate.
Okay.
Yes. The folks over there, it's Morgan's over there, and then Carla are the two main people that run that. But yeah, they know their stuff. When the ODA showed up, the original people that wrote our original PMA, like, hey, we had obviously we got government agents on our door. What are we supposed to do? Oh, well, I charge $100 an hour donation to my business to tell you how to deal with the agents that,
That doesn't sound very helpful.
No. So anyway, Pro Advocate was incredibly helpful, got us straightened out, took care of us. And, again, the agents had to leave because we were set up properly.
So what you're telling all of us is that we need to know our stuff and then go rogue. Know what the rules really are, which you have to assume your inspector doesn't. And then we just need to form an alternative food system.
Yes, we need to form an alternative reality, alternative universe.
Yeah.
Because if all of us farms were PMAs working with each other, the ODA agents would sit there and twiddle their thumbs and just inspect grocery stores.
Right.
And when you think about the economies of scale that start to develop with all of this, it's mind-blowing what we could accomplish.
Right. Well, this needs to happen with the medical system, the educational system, the economic system, all of these systems. We need to work hard at pulling out of all these. But then there's Amazon and Walmart, and they are incredibly good at sucking us in.
But can we ignore them?
Because they're so convenient.
Can we ignore them? Can we just say, it's a free country, let people do that if they like. I think we have critical mass.
But I do think that we have to consciously pull out of that system.
Yes, as individuals, yes.
Yeah, Amazon's a tough one because I end up using them.
I know.
Here's the thing, like I need a specific nut and I could go to like 16 different places locally and eventually find it, but it's literally one click away and it's on my door the next day. I totally understand the problem with Amazon and how it is hurting us. But it also, as a very time-strapped small farm, there's also incredible.
It's a little bit like buying in hay for now, or buying in straw.
Exactly.
For now, right?
Yes.
And so I like to think that if we were on the Titanic and it was sinking, and we tied a bunch of deck chairs together to make a raft, it'd be okay to use the Titanic's deck chairs to make our raft. Our goal wouldn't be to stay on the Titanic with the deck chairs. It would be to use what was available at the time to get away, and then we'd work at setting up a system that actually had some resiliency. So we do the same thing ourselves. We're ordering in from Amazon at the same time that when we can, we prioritize going not to Lowe's, but to our local M&M hardware that's locally owned by somebody we know, going to our local mechanic. As you know, if the day could come when our alternative system was sufficient, like you said, if we were all tied together, if it was sufficiently integrated, we could withdraw sufficiently from the cash economy to just help each other in barter systems, BMA systems, and reduce to a level that makes it negligible the ways that we have to use the greater economy. Sort of like our food system. People say, okay, you grow 95% of what you eat and what your animals eat. What's the other 5%? Well, the other 5% is stuff we can do without: coffee, tea, sugar, that sort of thing. So that if we need to give them up at some point, we can, and the whole system doesn't come crashing to a halt.
Yeah. And I also think one thing that you talked about earlier is you mentioned the convenience of Walmart.
Yeah.
And going back to this whole family that's rat race, just 95 miles an hour, they have to go to Walmart because they don't have time to drive an hour each way to go to a farm, which I think, again, we can debate that and try to help them with that. But with our farm, and one of the reasons our farm has exploded so fast is because we've said, okay, how can we be more convenient, more easy to, and so that was when we decided this winter that we're like, okay, I guess our farm store will stay open 5 days a week. We didn't want to. We didn't have the necessary traffic, but we designed a system that allowed us to stay open because it would allow us to be more convenient. And that when you build, all it takes is changing the habits.
Yeah.
And we've started to change the habits of people in our community that they shop with us.
Yeah.
And so now we're also, so the convenience aspect of being open multiple days a week, and it's very local and very convenient, but also now, all right, so what things do they want to buy from us? And it's, well, they don't want to buy corn on the cob and then cut the corn off the cob and make a corn salsa. They want the corn salsa. Well, we have corn that's starting to go bad because, or not go bad, but it's getting old. So let's move that into the kitchen. And so it's also allowed us to be way more efficient with the product, but also be more convenient to our customer. And that is where we want to try to help farmers to move, to really think about how can you be more convenient? And again, if you can operate outside of the government FDA system, now you're starting to go places because they try to slow you down when you get anywhere close to doing any sort of processing.
The other thing that I want to stick in there is that what you're talking about is value adding. You take a product that has you take a certain amount of biomass that has a certain cash value, and you say, how can I add value to this without adding biomass to it? And that takes us back to something that I think is important for the beginner. And no, it's important for anybody who hasn't thought about it to consider that when you want to manage a piece of land for its health and abundance, you're talking about managing it as an ecosystem. And ecosystems do very little importation or exportation. The biomass that starts there is not only sufficient for there, but you can't afford to take very much of it away before you start to skew its balance in a direction you can't necessarily predict.
A dust bowl.
Yeah, absolutely, dust bowl. We can predict that. But when you value add, like saying, okay, well, I've got tomatoes and I've got corn, I've got onions, let's make salsa.
Yes.
You're using brains and dexterity. The fact that we can make tools and use them, and we can use our brains to think, what does my customer want? How can I make this more convenient? To take a little biomass that my farm can spare and turn it into a fair amount of cash back, just by being clever about it, by being thoughtful, by saying, how can I better serve my customer?
Well, here's the other cool aspect of this is we have people that love our farm, but they're not all farmers. They can't go out. I mean, it's 95 degrees today.
Right.
They can't go out in the 95 degrees. They need to be in an air conditioned, but they got fast hands. And so this allows us to involve a significant larger percentage of our community, because we now have a whole system that can use people of all abilities, time commitments.
So what
we're
are
now
they
just
doing?
so like we have a freeze dryer now. So literally they'll just take boxes of peaches, chop them up, they go through the freeze dryer. I mean, that's a lot of people can do that.
All right.
So I mean, we're also thinking about other things that we can do too that are like more actual like equipment wise. We've got a guy that wants to come on and work with us, but I know I can't pay him what he's worth for the hours. So I think because we have the farm equipment's nice, good quality equipment, but we only use a certain number of hours on it a week. I'm like,
right.
That's wasting just sitting there.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to start offering like bush hogging and like land services and stuff, which then generates biomass for us.
Yeah.
Right.
That's brains and dexterity right there. Brains and food.
So we'll see. I mean, that one's a little bit different than some of the food processes we're offering. But what we realize is we're building a brand, we're building an audience. And then what other things can we offer to this audience? And so, yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. And unfortunately, we are running way too long because the other question I really wanted to ask you guys, we may have to save it for another podcast, is you got 8 kids and you said they're all in the trades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you, was that their own? Was there conversations about?
It was interesting. We were just talking to we've got somebody here who's doing photography on the farm, and what he was explaining was a story of his kid showing an interest in a particular area. And that's what we've been watching with all of our children is on a farm, you have so many different chores and jobs and all that kind of stuff that what you're kind of watching is when does a child say, ooh, I like this. This is the one I like to do. And you're not just running them all through the different things, but as part of a farm and a family, these chores do get spread out. And then you find a child who says, I'm particularly interested in that. And I think what's really important is you get out of their way then. And not just, but you say, how can I help you learn this thing or experience this? So as our children did start to do that, we would say, okay, well, let's buy some equipment to help you in that direction. And then start moving them in that direction. And we've been very fortunate.
Left out the first part of the story, though, which is when you have a family on a farm with serious intent, not, everybody has their own pet animal that they're responsible for. You have chores, right? But when you have a family on a farm with the serious intent of making a working farm, a business or an ecosystem out of it, very quickly you stop identifying as sort of authority and peon or teacher and student, and you realize all hands on board, including all brains, all attentions. We need to all know how this works. We need to listen to the smallest voice and value the smallest hands because everybody's observing something different. So we worked with them. I can remember the process of as our older kids reached 11, 12, 13, and we're all working together on this farm. I can remember I was very conscious of it. I wasn't deliberate about it. I wasn't making it happen, but I was very conscious of the fact that we would turn to a child and ask for an opinion or a piece of information. And it was an interaction between equals, not people in at the same level in the hierarchy, but still equals. And I think they took from that problem solving you're talking about. And it's been, we have our ups and downs for sure, but it's been a really joyful, great.
I think the other thing is my kids love working together. They love doing this as a group, as a project. And there were some big projects. There's butchering. That's a big family project. Everybody's on deck. Hay, when we were doing hay at the time. Any of the building, we always had a building project every summer that we would work on. And they really got to where they loved working together, and they definitely do now. So each of them now, as they start to settle and do their own family, they'll start on a project, and we will try and vacation. Several of us go to that site with them and help build. And it's been a lot of fun.
And I think too, that built into that, the farming and the homeschooling, was our growing conviction that what we saw the culture doing didn't make a lick of sense and was hell-bent for bad results. So that certainly was present to our children in our projects, in our choices about their education. And so we have 8 kids who are very skeptical about the efficacy or the safety of getting themselves thoroughly plugged into our technocracy. It's not going a good place. It's not they're all seeing their real incomes decrease year to year as inflation gets out of hand. And so they see their skills, their trades and crafts, as being the most valuable thing they could be doing. We do sit around sometimes. The kids, some older boys, have worked out a sort of conundrum. They say, Doughertys do competent work at unusual and difficult jobs for other people for not a whole lot of money. That's just sort of a definition. But that's not something any of us regrets. We wouldn't mind it made a little money. But.
Well, and I think there's that aspect of being your own boss. There's an inherent freedom there of and the skills too, which is to me worth way more money. And obviously when you run your business too, there's tax write-offs and all that sort of fun stuff too, which it was interesting that we took our tax down to the local tax office, and the woman I found out recently is a pretty strong Democrat. And she was a little offended with how much money that we supposedly made. Because she shops here and she knows like just how big the place is. So she kind of assumes that, we're making all this money. But, she also doesn't have a business. She doesn't realize what write-offs are and how that all works. But yeah, I mean, like on paper, it showed me made so much money. The government started sending my wife, WIC stuff. Like, hey, you should sign up for this. You should sign up for this. And I was like, nope.
That's right. We can do without it.
We can do without it. But it was kind of humorous.
I think that's something that you sharing that is really encouraging to people. I think it's important that we form a culture that actively discourages using money as a metric for success. As somebody said to us recently, she was trying to explain, she's known us for a long time, and she's had us work on her farm, and she said, thank you for making this okay. And as I tried to figure out what she meant, I think she meant driving a junky car, wearing secondhand clothes, obviously living outside of the cash success story and having fun at it and not caring. And I think that's something we all need to really promote as an earmark of our culture. We reject the idea that we can be measured with money.
That embracing poverty is really a virtue.
Yeah, whatever they want to call poverty, those WIC stamps.
Well, and what is success? I think that's what it comes down to, is that we've taken success and just turned it on its head. It's not fame. It's not money. It's success is being able to, on a Sunday morning, going to the local peddler's mart. We did that yesterday, and we walked the aisles and looked at all the old things they had for sale.
Oh, fun.
And all the cool things they had. And at the end of that, we didn't buy a thing because we didn't need anything.
Right.
But we were able to have a good conversation, and they were all excited to see. One little thing was all like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little different Lego figurines. And I mean, we spent a couple, but that was something we could then talk about for the rest of the day.
Right.
Well, and ultimately, really, we just want to get our kids to heaven. I mean, that's what the real goal is that piece of.
You guys are so unworldly. Whatever happened to a Ferrari? Come on.
Oh, one day I'll probably, eventually the farm will make money, because we are on that. It's a 10-year journey. We know that we are, where we'll be. And I did tell my wife, yes, I probably will want a cyber truck, but by then it'll be really cheap. Because it does sound
used anyway.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It'd be very used and very cheap. But she was laughing at me. But I mean, again, yeah, you're right. Our vision, our mission right now is to heal our community. And
that's right.
And that kind of is where we're headed. And along the way, yeah, we don't need to go to Kings Island or a cruise.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what it comes down to.
Right. Besides which, guess what? Their economy is producing the lunacy we've been watching over the last few days. And our economy produces tomatoes. I'll take the tomatoes.
Yeah, and raw milk. So
yeah.
All right. Well, this has been lovely. I really appreciate both of your times here. This has just been, I really enjoyed this.
Thanks.
Yes, I definitely do need to get up there at some point. I'm just,
It'll be fun.
We're farming. So
around.
Yes, but I'm really excited about to see that new house, because I love purpose-built, old style construction. And I'm just really excited to see how that comes out. So
we'd love to have you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again so much.
You bet.
God bless.
So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.